I'm Sophia Bogle, the president of the Friends of Hannon Library. Welcome to the 26th Annual William Stafford Poetry Celebration. Thank you all for being here. Before we begin this virtual event, it's our tradition to take a moment to acknowledge our connection to this land, its history, and its present. The following is a formal land acknowledgement written by the members of the Native American Studies program here at SOU. Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon is built on the traditional lands of the Takelma and Shasta peoples. Today, we recognize the many tribes and bands who call the Klamath Basin region their ancestral territory. And we highlight the continued sovereignty of the 9 tribes of Oregon and Northern Californian tribes who have ties to this place. Okay, so the Friends of Hannon Library is a group dedicated to enriching the offerings of the Hannon Library, from expanding the overall scope of the collection to being able to add rare volumes to the Marjorie Bailey Shakespeare collection. And of course, we put on this speaker series to help bring our community together. If you too believe in the awesome power of libraries to make the world a better place, please consider joining us and becoming a member of the Friends of Hannon Library. I want to let you know about some of the upcoming events for the next 4 months. We have Margaret Perrow and Amber Reed will share with us the shifting landscapes of learning in post-apartheid South Africa. That's next month. Then in March, we have Betty Leduc, who will reflect on the challenges of 2020 for art, community, and social justice. Our April event lets us explore Dangerous Crooked Scoundrels, Insulting the President from Washington to Trump by Ed Battistella. And May is our last event of this season with Stephanie Raffelock and a panel of SOU students who will be discussing the creative surge of midlife women and feminist history. We are currently considering speakers for next year and would love to get your suggestions. So you can email us about that. Before I turn this over to our host tonight, Amy Miller, I'm just going to go over 4 technical items that will help us all relax and enjoy the evening. Number 1, this event is being recorded and will be available later on after we do some editing. Number 2, because this is a webinar rather than a normal Zoom, you will not be able to see yourself and you will be muted during the presentation. However, we will have an open mic at the end, and if you raise your hand at the bottom center of the screen later during the open mic period, we will call on as many of you as time allows to read a William Stafford poem. And at that time, we'll actually bring you in as a panelist and you'll be seen then. But Erica will explain all that later. Also, number 4, the chat feature is disabled for this event. While we do not plan to have a formal Q&A, the Q&A feature is available if you have questions, and we'll work behind the scenes to answer them. If you're having technical difficulties, you can email the tech help link that's found in your registration email. Now I would like to introduce our host for the evening. Amy Miller is an Ashland poet and writer whose work has appeared in many literary journals and magazines, ranging from Gulf Coast and Ziziva to Fine Gardening and Asimov's science fiction. Her most recent poetry collection, The Trouble with New England Girls, won the Lewis Award from Concrete Wolf Press. She works as the publication's project manager for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and is the poetry editor of the JPR members magazine, Jefferson Journal. This is Amy's 4th year hosting the Hannon Library's William Stafford celebration. The event was founded by Vince and Patty Wixon, who served as its organizers and hosts for 22 years. They are still very active in the Oregon poetry community today. Without further ado, take it away, Amy. Let's hear all these poets.
Thanks very much, Sophia. So everyone, that was Sophia Bogle, who is the president of the Friends of the Hannon Library. And I'd like to thank her first and foremost for putting together this event tonight and figuring out how to do it on Zoom for the very first time. So I know that a lot of you in attendance have probably been coming for many years. Usually we pack that room in the Hannon Library and it's so great. We have cookies at halftime and it's always a lot of fun. And I'm just delighted that Sophia and Erica Knotts, who is also in attendance tonight, who is our SOU tech person. Between the two of them and a couple of other people, they have figured out how to do this via Zoom, as well as the entire Hannon Library speaker series this winter and spring. So my hat is off to both of them for making this possible, because I know a lot of people are really attached to this event, and I certainly am too. So tonight is the 26th anniversary of this gathering. It's been going on for 26 years. Of course, it honors the poet William Stafford, for those of you who have never been to one of these before. It was founded in 1995, this particular gathering for William Stafford. Patty and Vince Wixon were the original organizers and hosts. And for up to the last 4 years, Patty emceed it, and Vince always gave reports from the William Stafford archives. And Vince and Patty are probably in attendance tonight. Hi, Vince and Patty. Fingers crossed that it all goes okay tonight. So these annual William Stafford celebrations take place all over Oregon in January, honoring William Stafford's birthday, which is actually January 17th. So it's just a few days away. This will be his 106th birthday, or would be if he were still with us. The William Stafford events were originally co-sponsored by the William Stafford Archives, went back when they began, and they've kind of gone off on their own. So there are a whole bunch of them around the state. And if you want to Google them, you can probably attend all of them this month, because they're all happening via Zoom, which is pretty wonderful. William Stafford was a poet and educator whose influence and legacy are strongly felt in the world of Oregon poetry today. He taught at Lewis and Clark College for many years and traveled widely to give workshops all over Oregon, all over the West, all over the country. He taught and knew many people who are attending this event tonight. It's always this kind of living legacy celebration that we do, because he has a lot of friends in the room. William Stafford served as the United States Poet Laureate in 1970 and 1971, and he was the Oregon State Poet Laureate for 15 years, from 1975 to 1990. He died in 1993. Although William Stafford is known for his poems of the Western United States and poems about nature, his work encompassed much more than that. He was also an astute observer of politics and culture. His experience as a conscientious objector during World War II informed a lot of his writing and philosophy. So as we all know, this past, well, it's been a week and a day now, hasn't it? Has been quite an experience for us as a country. I imagine that it sent a lot of you, as it did me, looking for William Stafford poems and William Stafford quotes. There always seems to be something going on in January that sparks us looking for particular types of poems by Stafford. And this is certainly no exception, although this is a highly unusual case this time. So I went looking for some lines and some quotes. And this is one that I found, one of many that seems appropriate for this week. This is from his book, Every War Has Two Losers, William Stafford on Peace and War. And the quote is, "A speech is something you say so as to distract attention from what you do not say." William Stafford published more than 65 books of poetry and prose. I like to say that every year, because that's just incredible. And he got kind of a late start. Like, he didn't start publishing until he was 50 or something like that. That is a lot of books, and that is something for us all to aspire to, I think. During his lifetime, in addition, he wrote roughly 20,000 poems. That is the real number, 20,000. And he kept up a regular practice of writing every day, very early in the morning. So I want to thank the Friends of the Hannon Library. Thanks Sophia and Erica again for continuing this rich tradition that we do every year. And I'd really like to thank you all for being here. I'm so glad you're here. I just, on a personal note, I wanted to mention that a dear friend of many of us, Dave Harvey, is not attending tonight because it's his birthday. It's a good reason. He's 83 today, and he will probably see this when the video recording comes out. So Dave, if you're seeing this, we love you and happy birthday. So just a quick overview of how it's going to work tonight. We're going to start out with 6 featured poets, each of whom will read one poem by William Stafford and one by them. Our speakers, featured poets tonight, will be Angela Decker, Barry Vitkoff, Susan Dumond, Pepper Trail, Teal, Aisha, Ansari, and Michael Dillon Welch. After our featured poets, we'll have a special presentation by James Armstrong, who teaches at Winona State University in Minnesota. And he'll be speaking on William Stafford and popular modernism. After James speaks, we're going to have as Sophia mentioned, we're going to have a brief visit by our wonderful tech person, Erica Knotts, who will explain how the open mic is going to work and how to participate. It should be pretty easy, we think. And then probably right after she speaks, we're going to take a very quick intermission, just about 5 minutes or so, a little bio break for everybody, stretch your legs, refresh your snacks. And then at the end, we'll have the open mic where everyone from the audience is welcome to read a favorite poem by William Stafford, or even a not favorite one that just happens to be particularly pertinent right now. And then we'll have a few closing words at the end. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our featured poets. Our first featured poet tonight is Angela Decker. Now, Angela sent me a very brief, very modest bio, and I'm going to add to it just a little bit because she didn't mention in her bio that the thing that a lot of you already know, or maybe you don't know that you know, she is the JPR host for Morning Edition. So you probably hear her voice every morning here on the radio in Rogue Valley. In addition, Angela is also a longtime poet and writer, and her writing has appeared in Nasty Women Poets, an anthology of subversive verse, Hip Mama, African Voices, and other journals. She lives in Ashland with her husband, her 2 sons, and often a bunch of foster kittens. Please welcome Angela Decker.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you to the Hannon Library. I love the William Stafford celebration, and I thought at first, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be online, and that kind of poet reunion feeling that you usually get, we won't have, but I'm already having it, and I'm seeing poets, and like just watching the, just the numbers of people popping up, and that warm feeling you have when you're talking about William Stafford and celebrating his work. And I will admit that before we moved to Oregon 16 years ago, I'd never heard of William Stafford. And of course now I'm a huge fan. And I have to say, Amy, honestly, that's what we were doing last week when everything was just going bananas, and we were all looking at poems for comfort, and William Stafford's name came up over and over. So I picked one for this reading because I've got two teenagers, and there's just been it's just been a hard year. 2020 was hard, and it's still going. And one of my sons he's 18, he's planning college and things like that. So we were, I was trying to find something that sort of spoke to the young people in my life. So this is the William Staffords for my young friends who are afraid. There is a country to cross you will find in the corner of your eye, in the quick slip of your foot, air far down, a snap that might have caught. And maybe for you, for me, a high passing voice that finds its way by being afraid. That country is there for us, carried as it is crossed. What you fear will not go away. It will take you into yourself and bless you and keep you. That's the world, and we all live there. What I love about when you're going through William Stafford's poems, there's so many that every time it's like the first, it's just like, it's all new. And then I'd written this last year for my kids. For Black boys who say they have no country, can't argue much with that. Seems America is a fight you can't win, but don't quit yet. Step over the mud, the want and grab. Keep on stepping, son, with your made in America walk, that long-legged, heavy stride. Move toward whatever the hell you want. Eyes up, teeth together. Let them see you coming strong and steady, like there's nothing can stop you. You've got the light in you. You've got the fire, the fury, the wonder. You're a whole damn nation. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. Our second featured poet tonight is Barry Vitkoff. Barry lives in Ashland with his wife and 2 standard poodles. After an almost 40-year career in education, he now enjoys bocce, cycling, and our community's rich cultural life. He has been published in EAP, the magazine, Literary Yard, Scarlet Leaf Review, Vita Brevis, and the Centrifictionist. His collection of poetry, Where I Live Some of the Time, is due to be published by Finishing Line Press next month. Please welcome Barry Vitkoff.
Thanks, Amy. And thank you, Angela. When Amy mentioned that William Stafford didn't start publishing till he was 50, and then he published as many books as he published, I was thinking if it weren't for Angela, I might not be published at all. It was her support. And I'll have my first book published at 73. So I don't think I'm going to catch up to William Stafford. But what an honor to be in your presence and in everyone's presence here. Like Angela, I didn't discover William Stafford till I moved to Oregon 15 years ago. And what I missed before that is just amazing. And now to be lost in his poetry. And then when asked to find a poem to read, Waking at 3 a.m. was the one that personally resonated with my age. And I had to read that. And I've read it over and over and over again. And I keep discovering something new in that short poem every time I read it. I so enjoy the sense of disorientation that he describes, but being secure in the infinite possibility that it also exposes. And that poem, which I'll read first, obviously, inspired me to write a poem a couple of months ago called Waking in Fall. But then after the horrific events of last week, I realized that there was a connection between waking at 3 a.m. and the poem that I wrote, which I retitled Waking in Winter 2021. And I found language in there that actually connected. When Stafford talks about become a secret storehouse that serves the country, it was like, how did he know that those were the perfect words for this last week? And it connects to the last line of the poem I'll read of my own more fragrant days. So William Stafford's Waking at 3 a.m. Even in the cave of the night when you wake and are free and lonely, neglected by others, discarded, loved only by what doesn't matter. Even in that big room no one can see, you push with your eyes till forever comes in its twisted figure 8 and lies down in your head. You think water in the river. You think slower than the tide in the grain of wood. You become a secret storehouse that saves the country, so open and foolish and empty. You look over all that darkness, ripples across. More than has ever been found comforts you. You open your eyes in a vault that unlocks as fast and as far as your thought can run. A great snug wall goes around everything, has always been there, will always remain. It's a good world to be lost in. It comforts you. It is all right, and you sleep. Waking in Winter 2021. Winter's morning light filters orange through leafless maples, skeletons for the time being, emerging from a cold night. Why wake from dreams more lustrous than reality, with voices clear and inviting, caught between an inner and outer world? It's a hybrid season, full of memories and larder, when fog inconsistently drifts, making perspective harder and harder. But we rise, fighting the urge to stay warm, knowing a voice demands clarity and function, seeking the buds of spring and more fragrant days. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Our third featured reader is Susan Jumanj. Susan is an Ashland poet, author, and writer. Her poetry has appeared in Jefferson Journal, Prism International, The Smith, Spring Rain, Anesthesiology, and Chelsea, among other journals. Her memoir is called Another Place Called Home, Surviving Foster Care. It's about the story of figuring out life as a teenager in a group foster care home, and it shares the value of strong mentoring. Susan has a BA and a PhD, and in between, she studied creative writing at Columbia University. Please welcome Susan Jumanj.
Thank you, Amy. The more I think about it, those in-between years studying writing at Columbia were probably the highlight. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here, happy to be among you, and happy to be celebrating William Stafford. The poem I selected has to do with difficult times, not that we've experienced any of those lately, and with his way of expressing the difficulties and how they connected with some of my ways of looking at life and experiencing those difficulties. So the poem I selected is called Just Thinking, which is, I think, the way I usually start when I'm writing, and perhaps he did too once in a while. So here's Just Thinking. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window, no cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot. Peace, you know. Like the bucket of memory down into the well. Bring it up, cool, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. Well, when I read that for about the 97th time, I made some notes to myself about the connection that I saw between some of my experiences, like probation. Foster care is certainly a kind of probation, and how we incorporate or use, or hopefully in a productive way, the memories that we bring forward, and how we can see them in the light today, in a stronger light, hopefully. I want memories to contribute to the present, and I don't want them to control it. And in some ways, for me, this is what the whole thing is about. So my poem is called Childhood Remembered. You were a quiet child, reserved, one who wanted home to be safe. Remember? For a time, memory was frozen, a black hole in your mind. You chose not to remember. Then you raised your head and you saw a glimmer here, a flash there. Light came to be. I could see it in your eyes. But then you stared out the window. Life in foster care was not safe. How long? How hard? How much? After this, what? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our next featured poet is Pepper Trail. Pepper is a naturalist and writer who has called Southern Oregon home since 1994. His poems have appeared in Rattle, Atlanta Review, Windfall, Borderlands, Ascent, and other publications, and have been nominated for Pushcart and Best of the Net awards. His collection, Cascade Siskiyou Poems, was a finalist for the 2016 Oregon Book Award in Poetry. He lives in Ashland and works as a biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Please welcome Pepper Trail.
Thanks, Amy, and welcome to everybody. I'm sad that we're not all in person, but it's great to be together in this way, at least, and carrying on this great long tradition of celebrating William Stafford. So yeah, I had the same experience as many of you have already discussed of going to him for solace this year and certainly this past week. And words that come to mind when I think of him and his poetry are wise and humane and gentle. He's a very modest poet. And as I was reading through his book, his collection, I was struck by how many of his poems use the word maybe, which is characteristic of his modesty and his trust of the reader to engage with what he's writing. Maybe his most famous lines with maybe are from A Ritual to Read to Each Other. I call it cruel and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And what a moment to insert maybe, such a declaration, such a sweeping moral statement, but he leaves it to the reader to take that in and go with it. And yet after all that, the poem that I ended up deciding I really wanted to share tonight is not one of his gentle poems, really. Not one that I had had much of a relationship with before getting ready for tonight, but it seemed very appropriate for the time, and it actually led me to write the poem that I will read of my own. So this is William Stafford's The Old Hammer Place. The wind came every night like an animal, rushing our house, disappearing before day, leaving us all we could stand of the way it would be when a hand always raised over the world fell, or when horizontal tomorrow dimensioned out from a scene so deep it captured our eyes. The animal made off, thrashing limbs, taking a message in its heavy shoulders into the lean hills among the low stars, crashing. All this had got lost from my mind. Now no one in all the world tonight is even thinking about that hollow house when the truck left years ago and the moaning seasons began to wander through the room, stirring vines and their shadows that grew in the dark. I touched that wall, collapsing it there where no one knows, by the quavering owl sound in a forest no one knows. But the world is loaded with places for tomorrow to visit, though this has got lost from my mind, how the truck left years ago. Enough air moves any morning for stillness to come where the windows are. A place that changed is a different place, but a whole town might come shuddering back that had disappeared when a dark animal began to overcome the world and a little bird came to sing our walls down. And in addition to that powerful poem of Stafford's, I was moved by a story in the New York Times this week about how the coronavirus is particularly devastating Native American communities because, of course, it selectively affects the elderly, and the elderly are the voices of tradition and often the only remaining fluent speakers of the language of those communities. So it seems a particularly cruel thing that the virus is doing to us all. And this poem responds to that. It's called The Duties of the Time. There is a hiding place no one knows, a room no one remembers, high cold windows that rattled in the wind, giving us the white light of winter. There we laid out the world, while below mother cooked and washed, father devised chores to fill our hands. This was before any of you were born. Everywhere there are towns and quiet city streets with such houses and such rooms, populated with memories, echoes of words, some in languages gone under the earth, or only in untouched books with uncut pages. This disease takes first the breath, the voice. Even, they say, the taste of the world itself, of this food here on this plate, and also the old dishes, simmering on old remembered stoves, recipes forgotten to be shared. How many potatoes from the cellar? How many leaves from the bay tree? We mask and we distance, we isolate, monitor the privacy of our emanations. These are the duties of the time. But maybe between us, one other, to attend, to listen to voices, breathless with memories, echoes from rooms no one knows. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepper. Our fifth guest poet tonight is Teal Aisha Ansari. Teal is a Sufi warrior poet. Her work has been featured in Fault Lines Poetry, Windfall, Kebu Radio, and in Everyman's Library anthology, among other publications. Her collections include Knocking from Inside, High Voltage Lines, Country Well Known as an Old Nightmare's Stable, The Day of My First Driving Lesson, and Dervish Lions. She works as a data analyst for the Portland Public School District and is President Emerita of the Oregon Poetry Association. She hosts the Wider Window Poetry Show on Kebu Community Radio. Please welcome Teal Aisha Ansari.
Thank you, Amy. It's lovely to be here, although here doesn't mean what it normally would. It's perhaps even more important than usual. So as much as Stafford speaks to our political moment across a distance of how many years, he also speaks to the natural moment. And I wanted to highlight that because although I hope and believe that we're moving into saner political times, I think we all experienced the impacts of climate change this year, and we know that there's a lot of work to do ahead of us. So I thought I would read the Tillamook Burn. These mountains have heard God. They burned for weeks. He spoke in a tongue of flame from sawmill trash, and you can read his word down to the rock. In milky rivers, the steelhead butt upstream to spawn and find a world with depth again, starting from stillness and water across gray stone. Inland along the canyons all night, weather smokes past the deer and the widowmakers. Trees too dead to fall till again he speaks, mowing the crisscross trees and the listening peaks. And I thought I would read, in response to that, a poem that I wrote after Labor Day weekend, after we had had the terrible wind and the fires were burning down the west slope of the mountains. It was a very hard time in Portland, as in most of the state. The city was filled with smoke, and literally you could not see outside for days. And one of the worst things that happened was so many people lost power during the windstorm, and we were trying to get school up and running, and very, very many families didn't have power, didn't have access to broadband, and just were not able to connect with school. And so many people were struggling as it was. So a poem that I wrote at that time, it's titled Wind and Fire. Last night, the east wind tore into town, a river of hot air, stinking of smoke, sucking wildfires along in its wake. Transformers popped, tree limbs went down. Clouds of dust, leaves dead and living, went swirling westward on the furnace blast. In hot, gusty dark, the city held fast. Morning would bring weather more forgiving. Today, our students struggle with devices. Power is down. Broadband is pokey. Wind still high, air hot and smoky. Climate change brings crisis upon crisis. Streets cluttered with arboreal debris, while families flee homes, fire evacuees. Thank you.
Thank you, Teal. Thanks so much. You know, I just wanted to mention in this year of all these terrible things that have, incredibly terrible things that have happened, you know, in the poetry community, we've had this opening in a way with these online readings, like we're doing these readings that are not in person anymore, and it's been such a treat this year to be able to invite Teal, who is in Portland, and Michael, who is near Seattle, and James, who is in Minnesota, people that we wouldn't normally be able to have here. And so, you know, it's one of those strange and wonderful silver linings to this year. And I'm really touched. The next, including Teal, these our last three readers here are all from outside of the Rogue Valley. And we love our Rogue Valley poets, don't get me wrong, but this is a kind of a wonderful, wonderful shift. Our sixth featured poet tonight is Michael Dillon Welch. Michael has served as Poet Laureate of Redmond, Washington, where he curates the Soul Food Poetry Night reading series, and is president of the Redmond Association of Spoken Word. He was keynote speaker at the 2013 Haiku International Association Conference in Tokyo, and in 2012, one of his translations from the Japanese was presented on the backs of 150 million US postage stamps. And he should give a talk about that alone, I think. In 2010, he founded National Haiku Writing Month, which is at www.nahairimo, NAHAIWRIMO.com, if you're interested. He also co-founded the American Haiku Archives in 1996 and the Biennial Haiku North American Conference in 1991, which I believe is still going strong. Please welcome Michael Dillon Welch.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you to Sophia as well, and to the Southern Oregon University and the Hannon Library for making this event possible. And yeah, I'm glad I can join by Zoom, which wouldn't have been quite so easy if we weren't still in lockdown like many of us are. A couple of years ago, I um, gave myself the challenge of trying to write one new poem a day, and haiku didn't count. It had to be a longer poem. And it was hard. It was hard to sustain. And something that kept me going was a comment that I think many of you have heard when William Stafford was asked how he managed to write new poems every day and when it got really hard. He said, I just lowered my standards. And that was empowering because it, you know, to get something out and to have the rhythm and the practice of writing daily was something that was really important to me, and it was very definitely inspired at my lower times by that comment from William Stafford. So I'm thankful for his influence that way. So 20 years ago, I edited Tundra, the Journal of the Short Poem, and later had a brief chat with Kim Stafford about the possibility of publishing a set of his father's aphorisms. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to continue my journal. I started a family instead, among other distractions, so that possibility never happened. But I was delighted in 2014 for the 100th anniversary of Stafford's birth when the University of Pittsburgh Press published Sound of the Axe, Aphorisms and Poems by William Stafford, edited by Vince Wixon, who I believe is with us today, and Paul Merchant. Among the selection of longer poems sprinkled among the aphorisms was Things the Wind Says, which also appeared in Listening Deep in 1984. The poem immediately reminded me of the author and poet Sei Shonagon, who lived 1,000 years ago in Japan. She is famous for The Pillow Book, which is a collection of lists, gossip, poetry, observations, and complaints, such as things that make one nervous. I don't know if Sei Shonagon directly inspired Stafford, but I suspect so, or at least I like to think so. So here is William Stafford's poem, Things the Wind Says. And it's useful to remember that this is from the point of view of the wind itself. Things the Wind Says. Everything still ought to move. Of all plants, I believe my favorite is the tumbleweed. Water will talk if stirred. There are places in the mountains I am afraid to tell about, but at night you can hear me hint about them. Islands aren't so much. I never saw a cloud I didn't like. Steam is all right, but I prefer smoke. I was born in Kansas, but now I travel all over the world. I think it's funny that he thinks Wind was born in Kansas of all places. I spend my vacations in Texas. The best job I ever had was with Sir Francis Drake. My cousins live in water. They're a slow bunch. I'll dance with anyone, royalty, commoners, but especially refugees. So it may be anticlimactic, but here is my poem, Things Haiku Say, which was directly inspired by Stafford's poem and by Sei Shonagon. Anyone who's come across my poetry will know I have a long background with haiku. But this is a longer poem, not a haiku. Haiku is much misunderstood in English, where many people think that all one has to do is count syllables. But this approach ignores significant differences between Japanese and English. For example, in 17 syllables in English, it's possible to write enough content in English to make 2 haiku in Japanese. Merely counting syllables also leads many people to ignore more important targets, such as the kigo, or season word, and the kireji, or cutting word, objective sensory imagery, and other techniques that are more important than a misunderstood formal pattern. These, however, are all technicalities. To me, what matters most in a haiku is content and the feeling it creates, the things haiku say. And that's what I hope this poem is about, with a nod of thanks to William Stafford. Things exist. Brevity is an art. The world is a joy. The world changes. One represents many. Color shades meaning. Rain falls on everything. Each season takes its turn. The world breeds ambiguity. You have feelings about things. Echoes and shadows are also real. An image can be heard and tasted. You don't always notice everything. The glass is half full and half empty. Relationships develop between objects. Intuition reigns for writers and readers. The time of day is not always a metaphor. Sometimes it's enough to notice something. Harmony can surprise you as much as contrast. The thing is what it is, but only what it is to you. Now is ephemeral, but now is all we have ever had. Sometimes you change the world, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you change with the world, sometimes you don't. A flower matters, so does a stone, a rusty bolt, a boring sunset. Wonder is a fuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Well, tonight we have an extra special treat, a special presentation. Our guest speaker is going to be James Armstrong, and he's going to be speaking on William Stafford and popular modernism. James Armstrong is joining us from Winona, Minnesota. Very glad you're here, James. James has published poems in Tri-Quarterly, Gulf Coast, Orion, the New York Times Book Review, Split Rock Review, Terrain, and elsewhere. He is the author of 2 poetry books, Monument in a Summer Hat from New Issues Press, and Blue Lash from Milkweed Editions. And he's the co-author of a book of essays, Nature, Culture, and Two Friends Talking from North Star Press. James Armstrong is a recipient of the Penn New England Discovery Prize, an Illinois Arts Council Fellowship, and a Minnesota State Arts Board Fellowship in Poetry. He is a professor of English at Winona State University in Winona, Minnesota. He was Winona's first poet laureate and is the director of the Maria W. Faust Sonnet Contest. James Armstrong's scholarly interests include the poet William Stafford. He is currently writing a critical study of Stafford's poetry. Please welcome James Armstrong.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to the library, and thanks to Vince Wixon for suggesting me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read for about 10 minutes a very short version of a much larger article which came out in the William Stafford Journal and newsletter. So if you're not a friend of William Stafford, you probably should be a friend of William Stafford. Join the Friends of William Stafford is what I'm saying. And what my interest, my scholarly interest, is really in trying to bring Stafford into the critical conversation, which I feel like he's often neglected, because I think he's hard to pigeonhole. So it's hard for scholars to figure out where he came from and how he fits into literary history. And part of that is because he's from Oregon and Kansas. And part of it's just because he is as I'll explain in this paper, he has a strange relationship to chronology when we talk about modern and postmodern poetry. So I'm going to read this. It's a little scholarly. I hope you enjoy it. And at the end, I have a link so that you can get a longer version of it if you like. William Stafford is usually classed with the postmodern generation of poets who came into prominence. I forgot I've got a slideshow here. Hang on 1 minute. There we go. So William Stafford is usually classed with the postmodern generation of poets who came into prominence in the 60s, but he is different from them in key ways. He did not claim allegiance to the deep image aesthetic of Robert Bly and James Wright and W.S. Merwin, despite critics having lumped him in with them. He was certainly not theosophically inspired like Robert Bly, nor was he influenced by Spanish surrealism or George Trakl or Thomas Tranströmer. He resembles Frank O'Hara in his writing process, but Stafford did not, like the New York school of poets, take inspiration from modern painting and French poetry. Although he was sympathetic to some of Charles Olson's ideas about projective verse, Stafford was not indebted to objectivism or the Black Mountain School, nor was he inspired by either Buddhist or Hindu thought, as were Snyder and Allen Ginsberg. And I wanted to show this picture. This is Ginsberg and Snyder at a be-in in '68 in San Francisco. Stafford lacked the countercultural cachet of the young postmoderns. He did not wear a poncho like Robert Bly or tribal masks or prayer beads. He did not experiment with drugs or ecstatic sex. Stafford lived in a suburban ranch house outside of Portland and taught English literature and composition at Lewis and Clark College for 40 years. His spiritual center was not Tibet, it was Kansas, which was decidedly not cool. He regularly filled lecture halls and auditoriums across America, reading to long-haired blue jean students who bought his books alongside those of Bly, Snyder, and Merwin. He published thousands of poems, many with small literary magazines and avant-garde presses. Yet Stafford seems to come to a postmodern position from an utterly different direction, from sources unrecognizable to literary historians of the postmodern moment. So where did he come from? Chronologically speaking, I wanted to say sometimes he did look a little like a hippie. Chronologically speaking, Stafford belongs with second generation moderns like Robert Lowell, Randall Jarrell, and John Berryman, poets who were born like him in the second decade of the 20th century and came into their own in the early 1940s. Had Stafford been more in step with his contemporaries, he would have embraced the formalism of W.H. Auden and T.S. Eliot, and he would have conformed his taste to the critical writing of Eliot, I.A. Richards, and some of the Southern fugitives. He would have labored to write the compressed, packed, and ironical poem that criticism demanded. I think this must be T.S. Eliot figuring out how to write a poem in these little squares. I don't know what this picture means. Stafford's poetic taste seems to have been formed by what David Perkins has called popular modernism, the modernism championed by Harriet Monroe in her 1912 founding of Poetry magazine. This earlier stage of modernism was notable for its openness and eclecticism. In her description of poetry's editorial policy, Harriet Monroe used the metaphor of the open door, which recast the role of editor from a gatekeeper looking for excuses to exclude everything not conforming to immutable traditions into someone continually listening for new voices and willing to sponsor them, even when their experiments might lead to controversy or ridicule. And that's a quote from John Timberman Newcomb. This popular modernism is perhaps best represented by Louis Untermeyer's Modern American Poetry, which, if you're as old as I am, you may remember Louis Untermeyer's many anthologies and other books. I think he dealt with Frost's writing. He did a lot of literary work. But American poetry was, a modern American poetry was published in 1919 and then revised and republished every few years throughout the century. In his preface, Untermeyer praises Poetry Magazine's ecumenical intention to, quote, introduce the work of hitherto unknown poets and to herald with an eager impartiality the various groups, schools, and movements. He then listed the important modern poets who first published in the early decade of the century: Vachel Lindsay, James Oppenheim, Amy Lowell, Robert Frost, Edgar Lee Masters, John Gould Fletcher, and Carl Sandburg, many of whom are now forgotten or largely forgotten. By 1917, Untermeyer says, the new poetry was ranked as America's first national art. Its success was sweeping, its sales unprecedented. The democratic accessibility of the poetry met Untermeyer's enthusiastic approval. Quote, people who never before had read verse turned to it and found they could not only read it, but relish it. This was in part because modern poetry had jettisoned the elitist Eurocentric trappings of the genteel poets of the previous generation. New readers discovered, quote, that for the enjoyment of poetry, it was not necessary to have at their elbows a dictionary of rare words and classical references. They no longer were required to be acquainted with Latin legendary and the minor love affairs of the major Greek divinities. Life was their glossary, not literature. Close quote. Modern poetry embraced the demotic speech and common experience of the American people. Said Untermeyer, the new product spoke to them in their own language, and it did more. It spoke to them of what they had scarcely ever heard expressed. It was not only closer to their soil, but nearer their souls. Pretty strong words for the enthusiasm that was felt for poetry in the first part of the last century. Stafford's own experience testified to the popularity of modern poetry. His parents were eager visitors to the Carnegie libraries in the small Kansas towns where they lived throughout the 20s and 30s. Stafford records their delight with Master's Spoon River anthology and remembers reading both Carl Sandburg and Robinson Jeffers. As Perkins testifies, these modern poems were often adopted in secondary school curriculums, and the new poetry, Perkins says, quote, continued not only to be appreciatively read, but to form the stock idea of modern verse. As late as 1941, during his last graduate year at the University of Kansas, Stafford took a class called American Poetry of the 20th Century from William Savage Johnson. Johnson was a Yale PhD who had come to KU in 1908, and his specialty was 19th century British literature, but he was very interested in contemporary poetry. And his lecture notes, preserved in the Spencer Archive at KU, give us a glimpse of what he covered in that class. He gave balanced consideration of Edgar Allan Arlington Robinson, Amy Lowell, Lindsay, Sandburg, Edgar Lee Masters, Robinson Jeffers, Archibald MacLeish, and he began it all by a strong paean to Whitman and to Emily Dickinson. He has very little to say about either T.S. Eliot or Marianne Moore or Ezra Pound for that matter. But even as the popular modernists were clearly dominant in the schools, literary journals, and the homes of America, quote, other more avant-garde strains of modernism were developing among poets who would gradually supersede them in terms of critical reputation. In fact, the eclectic, accessible version of American modernism was exactly what the new critics were out to destroy. When Robert Lowell, the famous poet Robert Lowell, who was not then famous, but a young man, visited Allen Tate in 1937, he found Tate sitting beside a stack of books. Turning to the moderns, said Lowell, he slaughtered whole Chicago droves of slipshod Untermeyer anthology experimentalists. So much for Untermeyer's democratic inclusive ethos. Tate praised Eliot, Emily Dickinson, Yeats, and Rimbaud. And Lowell soon found himself, quote, despising the rootless appetites of middle-class meliorism. According to Perkins, in the years immediately following the publication of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, the modern movement split. By the end of the 1930s, the modern in poetry was identified in Eastern university circles with the poetry of Eliot as its prototype. If Untermeyer had declared that readers no longer needed to have at their elbows a dictionary of rare words and classical references, this new group of poets and critics would reinstate that requirement. If modernism had begun as a revolt against the orthodoxy of late 19th century genteel tradition, the new critics returned that modernism to academicism and gentility by essentially excluding its populist wing. Of course, this truncated version of modernism ignored free verse. It ignored the optimism and social progressivism of poets like Carl Sandburg. It also ignored the Midwestern regionalism of both Sandburg and Masters. Frost's New England was grudgingly allowed, but the Midwest and the West were not poetic subjects for the new critics. Quote, many of the new critics talked as if they were completing a revolution, says James Breslin. What they actually accomplished was what Howard Nemeroff called a Napoleonic reversal and a Bourbon restoration. I like this photo. They are very much representative of the sort of the academic. This is a room at Princeton University, and these are the academic poets who had sort of come to rule the roost. In studying Stafford's work, it is clear that he was never of his own generation, but it is also clear that he wasn't of the younger generation of postmodern poets either. His reference points are not the Beat generation, but the Dust Bowl generation. He is as much a poet of the 30s as he is of the 50s and the 60s. Stafford is anomalous because he never wrote in the mannered academic style his contemporaries cut their teeth on. He seemed to always have been writing in open forms or loose formal structures that employed everyday talk. This was because his exposure to poetry did not include an indoctrination in the new critical canon. Stafford's apprenticeship in poetry occurred not in Ivy League classrooms, but in civilian public service work camps in the backcountry in Arkansas and California, where as a CO, he worked for $2.50 a month, helping the Forest Service fight wildfires. As Fred Marchant has shown, Stafford spent those 4 years of internment rising at 4:30 in the morning to experiment with poetry, and during this time his voice was beginning to emerge. Fairly short lyric poems that addressed his immediate thoughts in a variety of forms. One can hear echoes of Sandburg, Whitman, Jeffers, Masters, as well as Dickinson, Frost, Robinson, the poets, in other words, that were popular in his Kansas youth. He moves easily between the formalist and open styles, but his subject matter is more consistent in each. Landscape plays a large role in providing the images, and the predominant mood is moral questioning of society and of the war. Like the popular moderns, he sought concrete instances and often, quote, portrayed a particular region, such as the prairies and the small towns of the Midwest and West. There is very little sign of his taking Eliot, Pound, or even William Carlos Williams, whom I think he later grew to like very much, as a model. As Fred Marchant says in his introduction to Another World Instead, the early poems of William Stafford, the fact that Stafford's first book was published when the poet was 46 meant that for most readers, quote, Stafford seemed to spring full grown onto the American literary scene without an apprenticeship, but that apprenticeship has been there all along in the poetry of popular modernism that he had absorbed growing up in Kansas in the years before World War II. This was not the only factor behind Stafford's successful career, but it is an important one, long overlooked by scholars who have been inclined to take at face value the new critical version of the history of American poetry. So part of my work is in attempting to place Stafford within the literary chronology and within the conversation of the time. And I think that this goes a long way to explaining what we see, or what the postmoderns, what his younger poetry companions felt made him so powerful to them was his embrace of demotic speech, of everyday language, his democratic attitude towards poetic creation, and his distaste for overly academic or too rigorously organized poetry, which should have been his legacy had he been in college instead of fighting fires with the Forest Service during World War II. Okay, that's my shtick. If you're interested in a longer version of this paper, Tim Barnes, the editor of the William Stafford Journal and Newsletter, is very happy to send it to you, and here is his contact information. I think Tim is with us tonight. At least he said he might show up. So get in touch with him, and also you could join the Friends of William Stafford and get your own journal. So thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, James. That was really a nice change of pace for this gathering, to go a little bit deeper into Stafford's influences and his influences on others. Boy, and it really made me think about the classes that I've taken over the years and the biases in those classes that are inherent to who's teaching them and the textbook that you're using. I think we all can go back through our educations and kind of interrogate those biases that we inherited from our teachers. That's all fascinating. Thanks so much. So we're going to take a short break in a couple of minutes, but before we do, the wonderful Erica Knotts from SOU, who is our tech person tonight, who has been making this all work smoothly. She's going to speak for just a few minutes on how the open mic is going to work. And then after that, we're gonna take a little break for about 5 minutes or so. So I will turn you over to the wonderful Erica Knotts.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you so much to all of our featured poets tonight. The William Stafford event is always one of my favorite events to attend, and I'm just so grateful each of you were willing to work with the technology and to really make this event happen. And it still feels just as powerful as if it were in person. So I'm really grateful for that. For those who don't know me, my name is Erica Knotts. I teach at Southern Oregon University in the communication department, and I also serve on the board for the Friends of Hanon Library. And so for all of our wonderful attendees who are out there, if you have ever attended the William Stafford event before, you know that we value not only hearing from our featured poets, but also hearing from you and hearing the poems from William Stafford that have had an impact in your life. And so just because we're virtual doesn't mean that we want to leave out that open mic piece. It just requires a little bit of maneuvering and a little bit more technology savvy for that. So the way the open mic is going to work is if you would like to read a poem, what you need to do is click on the button on the bottom of your screen that says participants. And when you click on that link, you will see a button that says you can raise your hand. And it's like, it usually looks like a little blue hand. And I see, yes, so many of you are figuring it out. Perfect. So what I will encourage you is don't raise your hand unless you want to speak. Because if you raise your hand, what you're going to do is I will go ahead and move you into the room and you will appear on the screen. You'll actually get to see yourself. And so you'll turn on your video and you'll get an opportunity to read your poem. And Amy is going to help me to facilitate this piece. So when you want to speak, you'll raise your hand. I'll move you into the room so you're in the panelist view. Be prepared to turn on your camera. And then Amy will tell the order of who's going to be presenting so you're ready to go. So that's going to be the structure. If anything isn't working, or if you're like, I want to speak, but I can't figure out how to raise my hand, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and post a message in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that as well and keeping an eye. So there's a couple options for whatever we want. But obviously, we've been on this call for an hour, and as an instructor, I know an hour is a long time on Zoom. So before we do our open mic, I want everybody to take a chance to stretch and just get a glass of water or just take a moment to breathe before we jump into that. So we are going to take a 5-minute break, and I'll have a little timer on the screen here that'll play. So once those 5 minutes are up, we will start the open mic. But that's all I have to share at this point. And yeah, feel free to post in the Q&A. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to present, and we will start in 5 minutes.
So you all heard the instructions. If you would like to read a William Stafford poem, please raise your hand. If you would do me a favor, if you happen to remember after you're done reading, if you would take your hand down, that will help me a little bit. I will try to keep track of everybody and make sure we get to everyone and I don't skip anybody. If I skip you, just holler, say something in the Q&A and let me know. And I'm going to call people in the order that I see them on my screen, which seems to be more or less random. So be ready. Okay. Our first reader, I am delighted to say, is coming to us from the Willamette Valley. The wonderful Ingrid Wendt is here with us. Ingrid, are you ready?
And just a heads up, it'll take a moment for the transition to happen.
Okay, there she is. Hi, Ingrid, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
you're good.
Okay, I just wanted to say it's a great privilege and an honor to be here. It's a thrill to see so many friends. I know you're out there in the audience, and I don't see you yet, but I will. And to meet some of you that I've been hoping to meet for quite some time. And to hear James's essay that I've just been reading in the William Stafford newsletter for the past 2 or 3 nights. I've been stopping and pausing after every paragraph because it's so rich. And thank you so much for writing that, James, and for reading from it. Pepper Trail, I've been aware of your work for quite some time, but I've never met you or seen you or heard you read. It was great to hear Teal, and whose work I know and admire, and I have admired for quite some time, and some new people too. So thanks, and thanks for opening this up. I had a terrible time deciding which poem to choose. I considered a ritual to read to each other. That was the first time I heard William Stafford read. I heard that poem and I just really was stunned. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, Mr. Stafford, where can I find that poem? I was really young and I was really shy. And he pulled it out of his pocket and said, here. And I learned that that was a gesture that he made many, many, many times. Everywhere he went, he pulled poems out of his pocket. And some of the lines in that poem are so appropriate to our time. It is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Very appropriate right now. I think you all know that one, or you should look it up, a ritual to read to each other. And then I considered At Fort Worden, Calling Names, which is really a heavy poem. It's a very, very much an anti-war poem. And I really want to, I'm going to read Assurance, because that is a place that I want us to be right now. I want us to feel that assurance that he offered everywhere he went and in every person he encountered. I was greatly, greatly privileged to actually meet him for the first time when I was 24. He was a friend of my late husband, Ralph Salisbury, and I was teaching at Fresno State College. I was very young, I was 24. And this is the week before Ralph and I got married, and he and Bill drove from Eugene down to Fresno, and he met my class. And that's the first time I met him. He had recently won the National Book Award. That's what he was most known for, very, very famous. Although, speaking of that, his first book that it's called his first book, but it's not really his first book, Traveling Through the Dark. It won the National Book Award, and was that 1964? I'm trying to think. No. It was, anyway, he was 46 years old when he won that award. But that was not his very first book, which a lot of people don't know. Just before that, 2 years before that, was West of Our City, which was a smaller book, not receiving much attention. But the Traveling Through the Dark was really making it big. It won the National Book Award. And so I was very impressed, and I was very young and very impressionable. I don't remember a thing he said. He visited the class I was teaching, and I was awed. It was a great privilege. And several years later, about 10 years later, I was getting ready to publish my first book, and I was selected to team teach with Bill at a writing workshop in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And every morning we met with the class for 2 weeks in a bank, in the basement of a bank, and no windows. And I'm sure that I learned way, way, way more from Bill than I taught the students. I don't know what I taught, but I learned a lot from Bill. And I've got this, I'm going to tell one anecdote, and then I'll read the poem. But the poem I've chosen, one of his assignments, which was memorable: see who can write the worst poem before tomorrow and bring it to class. So we all went back to our rooms, and we all tried to write the worst poem in the world. And mine was truly awful. And then we all read our poems to each other, and Bill had the best one. He couldn't do it. And we all agreed. We were all laughing, like, he totally failed that assignment. All right. I'm hoping some people are laughing out there. It's strange not to hear that, but I trust it's happening. And this poem really spoke to me very deeply. It did when I first read it in 1983. It's from Smoke's Way. The poem is titled Assurance, but it's a poem that spoke very much to me the year after my husband died, and in 2017. And I remembered this poem a year later and wrote a poem in response to it. So this poem, Assurance, I think really is what I want to offer tonight. You will never be alone. You hear so deep a sound when autumn comes. Yellow pulls across the hills and thrums, or the silence after lightning before it says its names. And then the clouds, wide-mouthed apologies. You were aimed from birth. You will never be alone. Rain will come, a gutter filled, an Amazon, long aisles. You never heard so deep a sound, moss on rock and years. You turn your head. That's what the silence meant. You're not alone. The whole wide world pours down. Somebody else.
Thank you, Ingrid. That was wonderful. It's so good to see you. So glad
to
you could
see
make
you,
it
Amy.
tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to see you, Amy. And I love your poems.
Thank you. I love yours too.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, great. Our next open mic reader is it really Kit Stafford? Are you here, Kit Stafford?
Unmute.
There we go.
I don't, let's see, there it is. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, this is so wonderful. Thank you very much, Amy. And hello to my friends, and so nice to come right after Ingrid. I remember a short story about Ingrid and Ralph, and Dad was with them at a restaurant. It was like a Skipper's or some kind of seafood restaurant that was, you know, kind of middle of the road. And they all remarked at how bright it was. And Dad apparently said, I can fix that. And he stood up on his chair and unscrewed the light bulb. So there was a romantic air over the whole scene. So I like to think of that. I tried to find the shortest poem because I don't want to take much time. I'm just so happy to be here. And so the first one I thought of, which is not the shortest poem, but is BC, about the little seed. And I love that poem. And then as I was waiting, I turned a few pages and found in a storm. A storm that needed a mountain met it where we were. We woke up in a gale that was reasoning with our tent. And all the persuaded snow streaked along, guessing the ground. We turned from that curtain down, but sometime we will turn back to the curtain and go by plan through an unplanned storm, disappearing into the cold meanings in search of a world. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kit. How wonderful to have you here. It's really, oh man, this Zoom thing, I'm telling you, where's it been all of our lives, huh? This is great. Our next open mic reader is a little closer to home than Ingrid and Kit are. It is our Rogue Valley poet, Peter Yeager. Peter, are you ready to read? Transition.
Am I visible?
Not yet.
Okay. Oops. Okay. Okay. Can I go sideways? Okay.
There you are.
Here, seen
Yep.
and heard?
Yes, you're all set.
Thank you. The poem that I've chosen to share tonight is from William Stafford's posthumous collection, Even in Quiet Places, published in 1996. 21 lines, 5 4-line stanzas, and the final 1-line stanza is 3 words, 3 syllables. 2 times the word "the book" is capitalized. The words are both capitalized, and 2 times the words "the spirit" are both capitalized, and I will emphasize those for those of you who aren't reading along. William Stafford's In the Book. A hand appears. It writes on the wall. Just a hand moving in the air and writing on the wall. A voice comes and says the words, "You have been weighed, you have been judged and have failed." The hand disappears. The voice fades away into silence, and a spirit stirs and fills the room, all space, all things. All this in the book asks, what have you done wrong? But the spirit says, come to me who need comfort. And the hand, the wall, the voice are gone. But the spirit is everywhere. The story ends inside the book, but outside, wherever you are, it goes on. William Stafford's in the book.
Thank you, Peter. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Amy. Thank you.
Our next open mic reader, I'm delighted to say, is a good friend of mine whom I don't get to see at all these days. Normally I see her a lot, is Dot Fisher-Smith. Dot, are you ready to read?
How does this
There you are.
turn on your, oh, start video.
There you go.
Oh,
Hey, hi.
oh,
Big
oh,
hug, big hug.
oh my God. Oh, it's so lovely to see you. This is a wonderful event. I'm so glad I tuned in. Thank you. I want to thank everyone who made it happen. And I've loved every minute of it. So what have you asked me to do? Start your video.
You're good. You're good.
Start my video. How do
You're
I get?
good. You're
Oh,
already on video. You're good.
okay, I'm good. Well, the poem that I have chosen is very short. It's called Meditation. Animals full of light walk through the forest towards someone aiming a gun loaded with darkness. That's the world. God holding still, letting it happen again and again and again. I'd like to say it again because it's such a powerful poem. Meditation. Animals full of light walk through the forest towards someone aiming a gun loaded with darkness. That's the world. God holding still, letting it happen again and again and again.
Thank you, Dot.
Thank you, Amy. Thank everyone, all the people I can't see, all the friends in the library, and the ones far away. That article, I just want to say, was very interesting. Where was, and I'm not academic, but where was E.E. Cummings? I heard all these other names, but anyway.
I'm not sure how we can answer that with our technology here.
I know.
Normally
Well,
James would get up to the mic and
I'm going to get the whole essay from Jim Barnes, and then maybe he comes up, maybe not. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dot. So we only have one more reader. Let me just go down. Yep, only one more open mic reader here. And so it's kind of getting down to the, two more people just raised their hands. Okay, never mind, we're good. Okay, our next open mic reader is, I believe, is this the Caroline Wright from Washington? Caroline, are you ready to read? Transition's taking a little time here. There you are.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Caroline.
I didn't hear. Hello, everybody. I think it's me because as you were about to announce the name of the next person, I thought I was kicked off the site, but I appear to be, put into a different tunnel, and here I am at the other end. I'm so pleased and so honored to be able to be here with all of you. Some of you I know, good friends among poets, and some people I am glad to meet for the first time. I want to read a poem by, actually, I want to read a poem called Vocation by Bill Stafford. It's the last poem included in, let's see, it must be, it's Traveling Through the Dark. And so I'm going to read it. It begins, "This dream the world is having about itself." And actually that poem basically was the title for this book, This Dream the World, which is my new and selected, which I don't necessarily want to advertise, but it's a beautifully done, beautifully produced book. And that poem came to me in a dream, and that first line of William Stafford's poem influenced me. But I have one little anecdote I want to tell about Bill Stafford. He was the first real poet I ever studied with, and this was in Port Townsend before, the Writers' Conference exists. And it was something called the Port Townsend School of the Arts or something, and a workshop took place every afternoon for a week or two in one of those wonderful old Victorian houses. And I was actually, and so we were reading works from one of the earlier anthologies edited by Donald Hall, and we were writing some work of our own. And I was also staying in another one of those amazing Victorian houses in Port Townsend called Starrett House. And Starrett House is the queen of all those Victorian regal houses in Port Townsend. It is now a very expensive bed and breakfast, but at that point it was just kind of ramshackle and run down, and all the paint had faded off it. And I had a big room, I think it's now the master bedroom, a huge room with an iron poster bed in it, standing in the middle of the room. And one day, while this class with Bill Stafford was going on, he was there, the family was there with him, Dorothy and the children. And it must have been Dorothy who asked me, our daughter, she needs to take a nap. Could she take a nap in your room? Because they didn't really, so I said, of course. And I think it must have been Barbara, because it was the youngest child. And I've never told this anecdote before. I don't think I had forgotten it for many years. But Barbara and I lay in that bed and we were talking a little bit, and then I could tell she was asleep, and then I fell asleep. So that's one of my blessed memories of my first experience with a real poet and his family. So I'm going to read Vocation. This dream the world is having about itself includes a trace on the plains of the Oregon Trail, a groove in the grass my father showed us all one day while meadowlarks were trying to tell something better about to happen. I dreamed the trace to the mountains, over the hills, and there a girl who belonged wherever she was. But then my mother called us back to the car. She was afraid. She always blamed the place, the time, anything my father planned. Now, both of my parents, the long line through the plain, the meadowlarks, the sky, the world's whole dream remain. And I hear him say, while I stand between the two, helpless, both of them part of me. Your job is to find what the world is trying to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. It's so good to see you here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much. I have to find how to lower my hand. It's not on at the bottom.
It has been lowered for you. Erica
Oh,
is, she's back there working the strings. Okay, our next open mic reader is somebody I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm so glad you're here tonight. Michael Holstein, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hello, hello. I want to first thank Sophia Bogle for inviting me. I live in Portland now, but I lived in Ashland since from 1988 until 2014. And I've attended many of the birthday parties. One of the things that happened to me in Ashland is that in the early morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, when I-5 traffic was completely quiet, I could hear coyotes from across the valley up in the foothills and in the mountains. And at one point I thought, what are these creatures? What are they doing? And I found a poem by Stafford on coyotes. And I looked further, and indeed I found 2 poems on coyotes. And Portland has a resident population of coyotes, so coyotes have followed me. So I wanted to share the coyote poems that I found in Stafford's canon. The first one is third person, and it's a bit didactic. Stafford speaks about coyotes and finds some lessons for us in them. And so I'll do this one first. The least little sound sets the coyotes walking the edge of our comfortable earth. We look inward, but all of them are looking towards us as they walk the earth. We need to let animals loose in our houses, the wolf to escape with a pan in his teeth, and streams of animals on the horizon, racing with something silent in each mouth. For all we have taken into our keeping and polished with our hands belongs to a truth greater than ours, in the animals' keeping. Coyotes are circling around our truth. The second one, titled Coyote, Stafford gives over to the coyotes, and a coyote gets to speak back to us. It's in the first person, and the coyote is speaking. My left hind foot steps in the track of my right forefoot, and my hind right foot steps in the track of my fore left foot, and so on for miles, me thinking nothing, paying no attention, while my nose rides along, letting the full report, the whole blast of the countryside come along toward me on rollers of scent. I come home with a chicken or a rabbit and sit up singing all night with my friends. It's Baroque, my life, and I tell it on the mountain. I wouldn't trade it for yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Our next open mic reader is Alice Mallory. Alice, you are up if you are ready.
Okay, am I there?
Yes, hello.
Hello, I'm Alice, and I'm glad to meet you. Amy, I've read your work. I am in a small poetry group here in Ashland, and we call ourselves the Rogue Poetry Circle. And so I just decided I would be here tonight, and I'm really glad to be here. The one that I've chosen is speaks to me because in recent years, I've started writing haiku, and it's kind of become my voice through haiku in my therapy as well. So this is William Stafford's When I Met My Muse. I glanced at her and took my glasses off, and they were still singing. They buzzed like a locust on the coffee table and then ceased. Her voice bellowed forth and the sunlight bent. I felt the ceiling arch and knew that nails up there took a new grip on whatever they touched. I am your own way of looking at things, she said. When you allow me to live with you, every glance at the world will be a sort of salvation. And I took her hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Nice to see you here.
Thank you.
Our next reader, so far, this seems to be the last person who has their hand up. If anybody would like to get in on a last poem here, you can raise your hand, or this might be our last reader. Our next reader is everyone's good friend, Joyce Epstein. Joyce, are you ready to read? I think she's coming on.
There we are. Are we there?
Hi, Joyce. I can hear you. We can't see you yet.
Yeah, the host has asked you to start your video.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay.
There you are. Hi.
Hi. Oh, it is so wonderful to see so many I consider dear friends, and it's like family. It really is. It is such a family for me, all of you. And how I appreciate all of the poems. So interesting to hear the choices that people make. And at any rate, I've been waiting to read this poem aloud to myself because I wasn't ready to go there yet. And this is, you know, one of the poems in the collection, The Way It Is. And Stafford has been a guiding light, particularly when I was involved with anti-war movements and so forth. And he was very inspiring. At any rate, I am going to, you'll understand what's happening as to me as I slowly let go of a lot of freedom that I used to have. And suddenly, oh, I'm not driving anymore. I'm not in control of things. And that loss of control just touched me when I opened to his poem, Trying to Tell It. The old have a secret they can't tell others. For to understand, you have to be old. You need that soft velvet over the ears and the blessing of time in your hands. Any challenging sound has a bell at the end. The vista you heard on the phone all your life has moved into your head, where it lures you away to listen away. The secret is wrapped in a message you begin to hear even in silence. And at night, it wakes you and calls. The secret is told to you by touches that spread a thin layer of understanding again and again. A hint, another conviction. You can't see it or hear it, but it's there, like a live wire, a power inside things, an art, a fantasy. You have always wanted more than the earth. Now you have it. You turn to the young. They do not understand.
Thank you, Joyce. So good to see you. Well, that concludes our open mic portion of the evening, and that concludes our event. I wanted to remind everyone that we do have the next installment in the Hannon Library Speaker Series coming up on February 11th, which is a Thursday. That will be Margaret Perot and Amber Reed on shifting landscapes of learning in post-apartheid South Africa. And that will also be on Zoom. So there will be a Facebook event for it and everything, and they are free as well. So check that out. Thank you so much to everyone who attended. So when we came on board here, what did I count? 83 participants altogether, 72 people in the audience. That is comparable to the live event when we do it. And you always worry that you're going to throw a party and nobody's going to come when you do these things. And a lot of people came. So thank you so much for doing this Zoom thing with us. It's wonderful to see all of you that we haven't seen in a long time. Thank you to our open mic readers. Thank you to our guest poets and to James Armstrong, our wonderful guest speaker. Also, thank you again to Sophia Bogle of the Friends of the Hannon Library, and to Erica Knotts, who ran the tech of single-handedly, and as to my knowledge, it came off without a hitch. So thank you so much, Erica. You did a fantastic job. Thank you all for coming tonight. Stay safe, please, and may 2021 bring us all joy and poetry. Thank you and good night.